Hi, I'm James Taylor, business creativity and innovation keynote speaker, and this is The Creative Life, a show dedicated to you, the creative. If you're looking for motivation, inspiration, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's an author, musician, entrepreneur, performer, designer, or thought leader. They'll share with you their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, and much, much more. You'll find show notes for this episode as well as free training on creativity over at jamestaylor.me. Enjoy this episode. Hi, it's James Taylor here. Today's episode was first aired as part of International Authors Summit. This inspiring virtual summit reveals the secrets of making, marketing, and monetizing a best-selling book. If you would like to access the full video version as well as in-depth sessions with over 40 best-selling authors, then I've got a very special offer for you. Just go to internationalauthorssummit.com where you'll be able to register for a free pass for the summit. Yeah, that's right. Over 40 New York Times and Amazon best-selling authors, book editors, agents, and publishers sharing their insights, strategies, and tactics on how to write and market your first or next bestseller. So just go to internationalauthorssummit.com, but not before you listen to today's episode. Hey, it's James Taylor here, and it's my pleasure to introduce my guest today, Mr. Ron Kaufman. Ron is the world's leading educator and motivator for uplifting customer service and uplifting service cultures. He is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Uplifting Service, and 14 other books on service, business, and inspiration. In 2018, GlobalGurus rated Ron the #1 customer service guru in the world. Ron is a man on a mission to uplift the quality and spirit of service everywhere in the world, including with us here today. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you very much, James. Pleasure to be with you and your viewers all over the world.
So share with everyone here what's going on in your world just now.
I was recently scuba diving with my wife in the Maldives. It's our avocation passion. And I'm about to jump on the road. I'll be traveling for the next 6 weeks all over the world, clients, family, working with different members of our team. And looking forward to being here right now with you and with everybody we're about to talk with.
So we met for the first time in Singapore, a convention. I got a chance to hear you speak, an incredible speaker. And then also got a copy of this book, which is Uplifting Service. Fantastic. This obviously was a New York Times bestseller. But as I was kind of going through it, one of the things that struck me is it has one of the best formats of any introduction for any book I've ever read. This was how I kind of like, because I love making notes on format and structure and things. And so the format you had was like, you had kind of crisis, problem 1, problem 2, solution outline, imagine if, taking it back up, and what you get by reading on. And I just thought, I'm so going to take that and use that. So this book here, and I know you're starting to work on your next one as well. Does it get any easier? I mean, your 15th book. Does it, from that very first book you were writing up until then writing this one, does it get any easier, or do actually the challenges become bigger?
Great question. I would say that in my case, the challenge has now become bigger because the next book is embarking into a whole other area, not just more about service and more about service culture, but the whole phenomenon of, why do human beings care about what we care about? And how do you take better care of what really matters? And that's not an area that I've had 3 decades of domain expertise accumulated in. So I do have a new challenge in terms of content development, in terms of story illustration, in terms of architecture, and shaping and crafting the overall message. I think if you're writing in the same space of expertise, but with a different angle, or the digital twist, or for this particular industry, or it's the action field guide rather than the step-by-step, that kind of a thing, it could be easier because you know what you're talking about. So there's 2 different areas. One is how much work do you have to do to figure out what you want to talk about? And then the other is once you've got what you want to talk about, how much work are you willing to put in to make sure that that book is an outstanding book, which is the #1 thing I stand for with anyone who talks to me about, I want to write a book. make sure you put in all the effort, all the investment, all the time, get all the advice you could possibly get, because once it's published, that book is associated with you for the rest of your life.
So you're kind of doing also a bit of a repositioning here with this new book that you're working on. I'm wondering then, as you kind of go into this new book, is it a bit like the Bob Dylan, where everyone kind of got to know him really well for doing this kind of certain thing, and then he went electric, and then there was like people kind of going, screaming, "Don't do that! We want to go back to the old stuff that you used to do." Is
really loud?
Is that a fear for you that you're going to come out with these new ideas, this new book, and actually people will just kind of say, actually we kind of wanted like version 2 of the previous book,
of the customer service culture thing. Well, it's fascinating that you use that example, because this week I saw Bob Dylan live in Singapore.
Wow.
77 years old. The guy is still rocking it. And the range and depth and variety of work that he's done, as you say, over different genres over the year. I mean, he deserved that Nobel Prize. And when they equate him to Shakespeare or to Homer, I mean, there's a good reason for that if you dig into Bob. In my case, I'm not so much making a complete pivot of genre. I'm just going deeper with what I consider to be the essence of the same message. So in my case, I'm known worldwide for being that service guy. Well, what is the essence of service? It's care. We care about each other. Therefore, we're willing to take some action to serve one another. What's the essence of care? Well, when you get right down to it, that would be love, the experience of genuinely heartfelt meaning for and with life and someone else. And I always say at this point, I'm too young to teach about love. I'll do that when I'm 80. But to get from the service guru over to that kind of uplifting of humanity, there's going to be this era here, this period of time where I'm writing about what is essentially a new topic, which in this case we can call it care, or as I name it, careology, word that didn't even exist until I came up with it. And that means migrating. That's a very different kind of thing that a lot of professional speakers will never really have to do. Yeah. Because they find a domain area, creativity, innovation, in your case, for example, or sales expertise, or somebody on leadership, and they may need a different flavor, a different twist, a different application, but a genuine shift to a related but not the same topic. That's a more, what would I call it, a more vigorous endeavor and undertaking. And so I'll be bringing even more of what I said earlier about you've got to make sure that what you come out with is fabulous, because people are then going to associate you with that, your credibility with that, your reputation will be riding on that. And a book is a brochure for whatever your business is. If you're a pure author, then you're writing books. But if you're an author speaker, or if you're an author consultant, or you're an author trainer, or you're an author something else, then what's in that book has got to guide your reader towards the larger back-end ongoing offer that you have built your business to be and you want your whole name and reputation and contribution in the world to be. And in this particular case, I haven't figured that part out yet either. So I'm not in a rush to come up with this new book. But, since we're talking about this in terms of an author's summit, it really, for anybody who's listening to this, to be thinking about, am I putting in as much effort as I should in every aspect of developing that book, every aspect? Because any one of those that you don't really pay attention to can come back and bite you.
So if we think about that move from service to care to kind of love, we're often told to to think of your ideal reader, have the ideal reader in your mind. What does it then mean to care, to provide service, to kind of delight your ideal reader when it comes to writing a book?
And that, James, points to just how nascent and how early in this work it is. I mean, the fact that this is a public interview and you're going to be going live and people around the world are watching it, we're kind of showing people very, very early. Because if we look at this phenomenon, take somebody who's in high school and they're getting ready to graduate and they're not sure whether they should go to work or should they go to university and what's it all for anyway, and should I be chasing the grade or should I be, connecting with the Now you get somebody who's in university and they're looking out at the work world going, what do I really care about? And how do I know that the company that's offering me a position is something that I'll be happy with? And what should I be doing as my meaning and contribution in the world, which young people today are struggling with? Or, hey, how about all the people midlife? You've got the 2 kids and all the responsibility in the house and et cetera, but are you really doing what you care about? Is this the way you want to spend the rest of your life? And what about the people who are about to retire, who have retired, and saying, is that all there is? Now what? How do I re-engage in the world where it's something that really matters to me? So this topic of careology, it will apply to everyone. which of those is my ideal rater? Well, that begs the question, where's the first place to land?
Yeah.
And then how can it expand from there? And the advisors on that, they're not people who necessarily help you design the interior of a book or edit the copy of your book or so much develop the promotional campaign as the early positioning of the project itself. And that's where I'm at.
That's such a critical decision then, because it's done well. If you make that first step, that first audience that you're really writing to and you're speaking to, you choose them well, then everything you do after that, it will be easier and quicker, because it's like a domino effect. So it's choosing that lead domino that you want to go for first.
Yeah, and in my case, it's a little trickier because I already have a global reputation as the world #1 guru, as you politely pointed out. Thank you. But in a very specific area, which is service quality, service excellence, service culture in business, and to a certain extent in government, a little bit in nonprofit. But if I suddenly pivot and say, now what I want to do is work with personal development and individuals and families and volunteer communities and faith-based communities, what happened to that guy? And so I want to be able to harness the credibility of one and bring it over in service to the other. So it just adds an extra layer of, this is interesting. You're going to have to really think this one through.
And for someone that's watching this just now who is perhaps a speaker, they're maybe new to speaking or very experienced speaker, or they have a consulting business in the same way that you have a global consulting business, what role does the book play? Is a book still relevant today in this very digital world?
Absolutely. The book is a brochure for the business. Now, in today's world, we can self-publish, you can lay things out, you can print your own copies, you can go on Amazon, you could be purely digital, you can record your own audiobook, etc. But the history of book publishing means that somebody put in all the effort to write it. Somebody put in the effort to actually lay it out and design it on the page. Somebody believed in it enough to invest in publishing and printing it. Some bookstores believed in it enough to put it out there. Some reviewer did enough, credibility associated with it to write about it. So then if you're able to say, yeah, I'm the author of that book, then it's not just because I had an idea. It's the volume of other people who've looked at that idea, looked at the work you did on that idea, and then gave you the salute that said, yep, that actually is a book. So that's the tradition. That's the historical space in which book publishing lives. And all of us really are beneficiaries of the generations of authors that came before us, that we can now say, I want to write a book.
And I mean, I guess that expression, she wrote the book on it. There's that thing we kind of think. And I guess, I mean, you also really know, I think of you, first and foremost in my head, I always think you as an incredible speaker, this speaking all over the world, especially around service. And I guess, one of the challenges that anyone that's booking a speaker, especially a keynote speaker, is they're looking at risk mitigation a lot of the time as well. And for them, for that, it's almost like having a trust indicator. It's, having that you're de-risking it for the client because they know you are going to know your topic. You have your expertise.
Well, the word author is the root of the word authority.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wrote it, you know something about it. And at least in terms of de-risking, if you're the author of the book, they know they've got an expert. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're a great keynote speaker.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other topic. So then you get characters like us who really put in the effort to learn two distinct domains, but see the linkage between the two.
Now, you've mentioned an expression to me before, page experience, which I'd never really heard of. I'd never really kind of thought about. So in this process of someone going from having an initial core concept of a book that they want to write to getting it out into the world and people reading it, what is page experience? Where does it sit in amongst all this?
Well, when the reader picks up the book and opens it to a page, the font that is used, the point size that is used, the size of the margins that are there, whether or not they're illustrations or icons, whether or not they're call-out boxes, how is the chapter heading done, what does the table of contents look like? In other words, is this book attractive? Never mind what it says. Is this book something that my eye is drawn into? Or was this a self-published where, the typos are found in there, unfortunately, or the page ends sort of in a weird, ragged way, and so it looks amateur. If you go into a bookstore and you pick up, there are a lot of books that are just pure text. But if they're published by a great house, they're generally going to look pretty good. Then you pick up some other books, you're going to go, I can kind of tell this has been self-published by somebody who didn't really get the advice that they needed to make sure that it looked like a highly professional publication. Now, in my early books, I did them all self-published, and part of it was because I wanted to design, here you go, a page experience that was, so engaging and dramatic. And I'm just showing you one page right here. But on this book, I mean, I could open it up to any page. And you could say, well, hold on a second. Is that a workbook or is that a book? And in this particular case, my very first book from the year 2000, this was sort of a combination of the two. It wasn't a workbook because there wasn't room for you to write down your thoughts. But it was a book that you could open to any 2 pages or even 1 page. And you'd be able to get enough right there to go, wow, that was useful. That was helpful. Oh, and it was a little bit entertaining because of the photo he put there. Oh, there's a caption. I'm going to read that too before I close the page. You could then close the book, get value, and I know you're going to open it again at another time.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, that's one kind of page experience to do. Of course, the challenge with that is try translating that into Japanese. Try translating that into German, where the language length is going to be longer, and now you've got to wrap it around all the graphics. So when I went to this book was not self-published. This is the 15th book that I've written. And the page experience, though, is still something that we spend a huge amount of time and rigor and hiring great people to look at, so that for the reader, the enjoyment and the engagement with what's on that page is something that gives them a sense of, and you focus their attention on what you're talking about. For example, you would never want to have on one page italic and bold and underline and all caps. Please, choose one.
It's a schizophrenic page.
Well, it's called in the publishing industry, it's called page noise. And what does it mean? It means that you're cognitively distracting your reader at a slightly unconscious, subconscious level, and you're making them work harder to figure out what it is that you're actually talking about.
So as you were kind of going from this self-publishing and then obviously into publishing 15 books as well, were there any guiding lights that you had? Any authors that you kind of looked? Maybe they wrote on very different topics to you, but there was something about the style, the way that they wrote, the way they were able to communicate, or maybe that their overall business that they had in relation to their writing.
Yeah, the volume of time that I spent in the bookstore, James, just pulling titles off, looking through, take my phone, take a picture of what do I like about this? What do I like about that? What's done well on the back cover? What's on the flap? How does that cover design look? How's the table of contents? So that was one kind of study. Then I really looked at business models themselves, because in my case, I am a keynote speaker, and the author side of my business is really not the part of the business that I'm looking at to be highly profitable. I'm not an author like a Seth Godin or a Tom Peters. I mean, these guys are making a lot of revenue from their authorship and the volume of book sales. In my case, I need that book as the credibility. I want that book to be in the hands of every single person I give a keynote speech to, so that they in turn will take it back. They may look through it right away, and they may look at it later, but it sits on their bookshelf as a reminder. I need that book to serve the leadership team of a large organization that we're serving, like Hewlett-Packard, General Motors, Coca-Cola. These are clients of ours worldwide. And every single member of their senior leadership team should have a copy of this book and be able to talk about it. We, as we're consulting to them, should be able to say, okay, we want you to go to chapter 17. Read the 3 examples that are there. Look at the list of questions at the end of the chapter. So as I said, it's not so much that it's a workbook like Write In, but I need that book to give people the guidance of do this next.
I guess that's the difference between, as great as academic writers are, and I always wondered why academics were paid less than consultants. And someone said to me, it's because consultants, the academics will describe the problem very well, and they will give, the background to it, and they'll give the data on it. But what people really want, okay, what do I do with that? So what? The Miles Davis question. So what you're kind of doing there is you're kind of providing, obviously giving all that context for everything, but you're actually saying, okay, with this is how to move forward on this particular challenge, this problem, and they can just pick it up from the shelf. When you're writing, you mentioned that kind of senior leadership. That's an interesting one there, because when you're writing in terms of thinking of your ideal reader in your head, for someone that maybe doesn't understand the corporate world, there is quite a difference between someone that's just starting an organization maybe on the shop floor, someone that's in management, senior leadership, C-suite as well. so are you writing very much for the vice president type of level? How are you thinking about all of that?
Yeah, it's a fabulous question. I'm just flipping here into the book to show you at the end of one of the chapters. Every one of the chapters here actually ends with a section that says for service providers and for service leaders.
Okay.
So in other words, I'm writing that chapter with enough of an engaging story, some interesting case studies and examples, highlighting the key points. But I'm going to summarize every chapter with, if you're a frontline, you're a first level supervisor, here's what you can do. If you're a senior manager, if you're a leader, if you're in the C-suite, if you're on the board of directors, here's what you can do. And actually, the topic is something that you share with each other. But remember, it works in my case because what the book is about is how do you build a organization-wide culture of uplifting service. If I wanted to write a book just for the leadership team, I would have skewed it that way. If I wanted to write a book just for frontline, I would have skewed it that way. But in this book, I actually wanted to write it in a way that both of them can embrace. And that was one of the developmental challenges for creation of the book. And I'm just going to dig into that a little bit deeper. You say you want to write a book. You've got some content expertise. You've even got a target audience. Number one, who's your developmental editor? What's a developmental editor? This is the person who comes in and says, wait a minute, you got this over here and that over there, and you should reorganize this, and this chapter's too long, and throw that stuff out. And I know you like that story, but it doesn't work anymore because the time has passed on. That's a rough stuff. Are you willing to have your book developmentally edited? If not, you're going to be risking going out there in the world with a book that really top people who know how books structure well so that they succeed in the market. You need a developmental editor, and that doesn't mean your mother, right? Then you need a copy editor, somebody who's actually looking at the words you chose. I give you an example. In my first book, I had these 4 different stories. And one of the copy editors pointed out that in 2 stories back to back, the customer in both cases was a man and the service provider was a woman. And this person said to me, would you like to mix that up just so that it flows better? I would never have figured that out. Then you get to the proofreader, and the proofreader is the third and final person on the page, aside from page layout, which is more of a graphic treatment. The proofreader is the one who's finding, you put the comma in the wrong place. You know, the one that makes sure there is no typo. The one who might even look at it and say, you know, the word that you use, the historical meaning of that may be slightly different for people in another culture. How about try this word instead? Whoa. That's different than, hey, I wrote a book.
That's a little bit, that one on the copy editor, it reminds me of something I noticed that you also do in your speaking. Where when you're using examples, you're using examples from people from different backgrounds, maybe different cultures, different nationalities, different industries as well. And I'm guessing because you're doing that because from the reader or the attendee's perspective, in their head they're going, oh, I know someone like that, or that's me. Or when they're a week later when they're at a dinner or something, and someone says, oh, what did you do last week? Oh, I went and saw Ron Kaufman. I'm reading Ron Kaufman's book, and actually mentions a story, someone just like you, or it's just in the situation. So it's a kind of word of mouth thing that you're kind of baking into the product.
That's important. And James, the other reason I do it is, as you know, I'm a very global person. I mean, I'm from the United States. I live in Singapore. I'm on more than 100 flights every year. I've been doing it for 30 years. The world is my audience. And so I don't want, and my topic is a global topic. So I don't want people going, yeah, he's the retail customer service guy, or he's the food and beverage customer service guy, or he's the airline food and beverage service guy. Actually, I'm the manufacturing service guy. I'm the supply chain service guy. I'm the technology service guy. I'm the financial services service guy. I'm the government service guy. I'm the community service guy. Service is a global topic. Yeah. That means when I'm teaching or I'm speaking or I'm writing, I need to make sure that my examples, as you pointed out, come from enough different aspects of the universe that people can say, I got it. This is a global topic. Not this is a put it in a niche and it doesn't apply to me topic.
Now the marketing and the selling for a book like yours, if we put aside, you got the Seth Godin folks on one side who are very much very B2C, you could argue, although they have big business audiences and that are reading them, and then you've got someone like yourself who I'm guessing because you're looking at this as a way to help bring you into organizations, whether as a speaker or as a consultant for them. How does that change the marketing and the kind of selling distribution of a book as opposed to someone like Seth?
Yeah, from Seth's standpoint, okay, you've got your book, you're so glad you finally got it written. It goes into the page layout, it goes into the final publishing stage, et cetera. And sometimes, especially first-time authors, think their work is done. Your work is just beginning, baby. It's the promotion of that book that will never, 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 never end. And if you take someone who writes a book that's more B2C, business to consumer oriented, then who do you want to review it? Which magazines do you want to write about it? Which bloggers do you want to show up on? Who do you want to interview you? How are you going to excerpt that book and tweak it in certain ways so that it's easily accessible from your own website? What's the PDF download that you're going to let somebody have as a checklist or a list of tips? That's very different if you are going B2C than in our case where we're going primarily B2B, where we're looking at leaders, organizations, competitive positioning, internal culture, appeal of the culture to attract talent, the ability to attract and retain customers, to develop loyalty. All of those are business issues that I just articulated. And so the kind of audiences I want to speak in front of, industry associations. The kind of publications I want to be in, business publications. You get the point. Now that kind of thinking about where am I going to promote this? Who's going to write about it? Who's going to interview me on this? How am I going to excerpt it into different smaller bite-sized chunks and make that available? That's as important as writing a great book, because otherwise you wrote a great book, but how's anybody going to know about it?
One thing I noticed as last time I was going through Changi Airport in Singapore is I see you were definitely in the store. You may even had like a part of the table as opposed to just being in the actual thing. I think you were kind of highlighted in that bookstore there. And I actually seem to remember there was a billboard of you there as well. So is that something that you and your team coordinate? Is that something your publishers organize?
Well, I work closely with our book distributor in Singapore because they're the ones who supply the books to, in this particular case, all of the bookstores in Changi Airport, which is my home airport, Singapore. And that's an investment. That comes from our marketing budget. Bookstores don't do that for you for free. But the investment that we make to have the billboard, to have the table space, to have the layout, to have the promotion of the book in that location makes sense for us. Because again, think about what's our business. It's pure B2B, large global organizations. I need to get that book into the hand of the CEO or someone who reports to the CEO. Well, those people are flying through Changi Airport. Well, how do I get them to see this? Then I can't just have it sitting up on a shelf. I'm going to have to attract their attention. That means the billboard. So then how do you get the billboard? That's retail space. You're then competing with, the whiskey that wants to be up there or the other publisher that wants to put some other book up there and is willing to invest in making that happen. And that's a substantial part of our marketing budget, and it works.
Absolutely. I mean, it definitely made a big impact on me. Kind of going through the store and I thought, wow, to be able to, and something like Singapore, which is such, as you say, such a global airport as well. It's a hub airport for people in the region and many other parts of the world as well. I thought that's a great position. That's a great position to have as well. And as you've been going through your career as an author, has there been a specific aha moment or light bulb moment, a time when you went, oh, okay, this is the direction I want to go with my writing, or you just made some key distinction in what you do as an author and as a writer? Yeah,
there was a moment, James, after 14 books when I'd been writing about service and how to improve service and how to deliver service excellence, when that whole era of books that I wrote, which is called the Up Your Service series of books, you can find them on Amazon and elsewhere, succeeded. And the implementation of that with companies is what required us to realize, there's another equally enormously important area, which is not how do I give good service, but how do I build a strong culture of service in this large organization so that we're serving each other well, so that we're helping each other serve the customer well. That's different than how to give good service. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of other issues involved there. And so over the decade, if you will, from 2000 all the way up through 2010, 2011, we learned an enormous amount. And then I wanted to put those two together into one book. And then that one book, which is the one that went to the New York Times bestseller list, I knew that the level of commitment and investment in that was not just I needed to have good writing. I needed to actually architect the entire set of intellectual property that we had developed over 20 years and bring it out to the world in a way, not where it's like, an academic tome, but like it's actually an enjoyable bestseller to read that at the same time inspires you to action.
I mean,
and so The commitment to write that book was very different than, hey, I've got a lot to say. It was, okay, I have to now take another level of maturity as a thought leader, and it's paid off.
But I'm probably sounding bad, being bad towards academics at this point, but something to bear in note, Ron, is you have the book, which obviously leaders are reading, but also Harvard Business Review. There was so much study and case studies and research into creating this book that I believe that Harvard Business Review actually created something on the back of that.
That's right. We published a white paper about how to lead a service culture transformation in the world. And it's, full of data and case studies and real examples, applying our principles, applying our architecture. And Harvard Business Review got a hold of that, and they said, we want to excerpt this and turn it into an article. And they called it Revolutionizing Customer Service. And, we're named in there by name, and the principles are cited in there, and the CEOs of some of the companies and the examples. So, that was a real nice solid pat on the back. But Harvard Business Review is not purely academic.
Yeah.
Harvard Business Review is writing for the business community worldwide. Now, I do want to say something about academics, since you brought it up now twice. Number one, in the world of academia, because a lot of people write there, there's a huge competition going on right now. There's always been a competition in the academic world. I don't consider myself an academic. I'm a practitioner. I want to know what works, and I want to help make make it work. An academic is a teacher. An academic is an intellectual. An academic is sharing, new knowledge, or they're assessing and evaluating knowledge, making you more knowledgeable. I want to make you more effective. A little bit of a difference there.
Yeah.
But a very, very good publisher, author, and presenter and promoter who's an academic today is going to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because you can have 1,000 academics around the world teaching a class and using your textbook. So whose textbook are they going to use? It's the one that's best written. It's the one that's best promoted. It's the one that everybody else is talking about. But that's not going to be every academic that wants to write a book. Same thing is true for us as keynote speakers or author or consultants or trainers. A lot of people want to write a book. Some of those books are going to stand out. I want your listeners to have their book stand out because they're willing to do the work necessary to make it a great book.
That's very, very interesting observation. I'm definitely seeing that also in the online world, where a lot of these top academics who are also great presenters, they're great communicators as well. There's a bit of a bidding war going on now with some of these big universities because they're rock stars on whatever their subjects, forensic anthropology or whatever the topic is that they speak on, and that attracts people into the brand of the university. So as we start to finish up here, I would love to know, what tools do you use to help assist you in your writing? What is the tools or the apps you use to write with?
I'm going to answer in a slightly different way. I'm one of those people that if I can see what it's going to look like at the end, I can make it happen to get there. You've seen, for example, a picture of the video production studio that I'm sitting in here right now in my home office. And, it's an incredible room, and it's got all kinds of equipment, and it's soundproofed, and et cetera. But before we built it, I had a designer make a picture of it for me. So when I'm writing a book, it may sound funny, but the first thing I need to do is see the cover.
Oh.
So I'll actually I'll go to 99 Designs or something and, take what I think is going to be the title, and I'll pay some people to generate a bunch of book covers for me, because when I can see the cover, now I really want to write that book. And then what I'll do is I'll sit down with the content and I'll start to break it apart into, well, actually is it 2 sections or 3 sections? Wait a minute, maybe it's 4 sections. Well, okay, it's 3 sections. Now within that section, how many chapters are there? I don't know. What's the sequence of the chapters? But I actually, when I write my books, I have a ring binder. And in the ring binder, I have those, folders that separate sections. And I actually build out a section for the different chapters. And then as I'm writing, I print it out. I'll stick it in there. And I come up with, oh, that's a good idea. I know where to write it down. I see an example in a magazine or something, I'll rip it out and I'll stick it in that part of the ring binder. And then over time that starts to accumulate, and it helps me gather into the already defined space everything I need to write that book.
I love that. And what's, there's that idea of begin with the end in mind. Warren Buffett's business partner, Charlie Munger, always said, invert, always invert. And that was his phrase. And so you mentioning that, how you kind of get the book, and it's almost, there's a strong visualization element to that as well in terms of making it so. We had David Allen on as well, and he said the very first thing he wrote, it was actually the reviews for his book. He sat down and wrote the reviews, including the names of who would be reviewing it, which magazine or publication they were with as well. It's very, we can love it, but actually it's incredibly powerful. And especially if you back that up with implementation and, just getting stuff done, as he would say, that's very powerful.
Well, David's a friend of mine, and I'm so glad I'm doing this interview with you, and that you shared with me from one of the other interviews. And I would encourage the viewers of this to watch as many of the others as you've possibly done, James, because you just taught me something very important for this next book that I'm working on, where I should sit down and go, who do I want to write the reviews, and what do I want them to say? Thank you.
What's your writing ritual? You mentioned you having these binders. Do you tend to write in blocks of time, or are you writing every single day? How does it work for you?
Tim Ferriss did a wonderful piece on manager versus maker. And it may be that he was just pointing to it, but I'm sure you can find it online if you just Google manager and maker, or manager versus maker. Manager time is meetings and decisions and quick reviews and all of that email. Maker time is carved out time to focus on the need to pay attention to and bring your creative and intellectual powers to focus on something long enough to produce good result. I'm just now reading a wonderful book called The War of Art.
Stephen
Not the art of war, the war of art.
Yeah, great writer.
He says, look, there's this thing in the world called resistance, that its job is to prevent you from doing what turns you on and keep you from doing what you really want to do. And you'll never get a chance to be who you really are because resistance won. And so what he does every day is he sits down and gets himself ready, and he writes for 4 hours. And he doesn't care whether it's good writing or bad writing. He just writes. And he calls it, I do my work. I do my work. I do my work. That's not me. Okay. I am a deadline-driven, extraordinarily successful procrastinator. And so what I need to do is set up deadlines where I've promised something to someone by a certain date, or there's an event coming and I need to have that ready. Or as you know, I'm about to go to Seattle and I'm going to carve out 48 hours of time, maybe even make it 72, and sit down and just work on gathering all my content for this Careology concept and project, laying it all out on the table, and knowing that effort there, I'm not telling people that I'm telling you that I'm going to go there, but I'm not going to give you the phone number where I'm going to be. You're not going to have my address, and I won't look at much of my email. I'm going to focus. But I had to carve out that specific time and place to make it happen. Once I get into a book project, it starts to really gobble up other available moments of time. And, it's not a pretty process to write a book. I don't know anybody who said, oh, God, that was so much fun writing my book. It's hard work.
That's great. I mean, what's really nice about interviewing all these different great authors is everyone's got their different rituals, different ways of doing things. Some people are really early in the morning, some people late in the evening. Like yourself, you're very good at the kind of batching, working very strongly to deadlines as well. So there's no right way, but you've obviously found that time, that how you operate best in terms of creating, that mentioned that the making versus managing side of things as well. Yeah.
Versus manager. I'll say one other thing about a very, very famous author, the fellow who wrote the book, Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Yes.
Richard Bach.
Bach, yes. I've actually got it on my desk just now to read it.
There you go. He's a friend.
Okay.
I met him many, many, many years ago when I lived on Orcas Island in Washington State, where he also lived. And I actually got to go to his house and met his wife, and we had a little food together. And he showed me where he writes. And there on his computer, remember this was 35, 40 years ago. And so computers were still pretty new back then, but he had the right equipment. And there was a Post-it. And the Post-it in the lower right-hand corner of his monitor said, I hate to write. I love writing. And I looked at it, I said, got it. When there's something I need to write, but once I get into writing, oh, baby, here we go. So the challenge is not writing. The challenge is getting yourself to sit down and write.
That's great. I want you, actually, you mentioned a couple of great books there already, but if you were to recommend one book that would help everyone with maybe the craft of writing, or even the business of writing, perhaps, getting your book out there, what would that book be?
There's a book by, I think it's Anne Lamott, called Bird by Bird. Bird by Bird. She's an author. She wrote a number of other books, Traveling Mercies. You can find her online. But the book title is Bird by Bird. And it's sort of a reflection on the challenges of writing. And she talked at one point when she was young and she had to write a book report. And it was going to be about a bunch of birds. And she was struggling. She was suffering with it. And her father was there, this very compassionate, helpful, warm-hearted guy. And he said to her, Anne, bird by bird.
Yeah.
And so she started writing it bird by bird until her book report was done. Right.
And actually, that's a great book in terms of just the mindset. And I know one of the other things that she does is she has this very small 1" by 1" little picture frame on her desk when she writes, in order to get her to remind herself, like when you're thinking all these ideas, it's so big and it's so, you can't get your hands around it. Just that, that, who is that, right, that story of that character, right, that thing. So we're definitely going to put that, a great book, Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott, we'll have that there as well. And finally, I want you to imagine, Ron, you wake up tomorrow morning and you have to start from scratch as an author. So those 15 books, they've never been out. No one knows who you are. You have no platform. You don't have the speaking platform that you have today. It's really have to start from scratch. What would you do? How would you restart things as an author?
I don't recall who first said this to me, but if I had to restart all over, he said, what people want is to get rich, get thin, get happy, and get a kiss. And if you can help them do any of those things, you've got an interested audience. And I think I would have sat back, and clearly with the Careology project, it's going to be around, get happy, but in a really deep, meaningful way. I would have, scanned the range of potential customers. And also, especially at this moment in the evolution of human history, I think, scan what's going on culturally in the world, politically in the world, economically in the world, technologically in the world, and think carefully about who do you want to be in 1, 2, or 3 decades' time? What do you want to be known for? What do you want to be asked about? What kind of conversational set do you want to be a participant in? Who else would you like to consider, a colleague, an intellectual colleague? What kind of evolution of humanity is of interest to you? So, for example, yes, customer service and service culture is my field, and it's mostly business, but I'm an educator. I'm an educator who helps you apply it. That makes me a practitioner in the business space. Now, as I make this shift into this area of Careology, I'm still an educator. That I love to do. But what am I educating people for? And it's a very different, larger, and hopefully even more meaningful contribution in life.
Wonderful. If people want to connect with you, want to learn about your writing, maybe start learning about this journey you're having with Careology, but even check out your previous books and your speaking, where's the best place for them to go and do that?
Best place to find me is at my website, which is myname.com. So it's RONKAUFMAN.com. If you're interested in the real B2B side of the business, you'll find a link in there that will get you to upyourservice.com. But there are contact forms on both sites, and I see all that mail that comes in. My own email address is easy. It's ron@ronkaufman.com, and I answer my own email. I don't promise 24-hour turnaround time because sometimes I'm on a plane or I'm on stage, but I do answer all of my mail, so people are welcome to get in touch, especially if they're listening to something from you, James.
Well, Ron, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I love your speaking, what you do on stage. This is a great book as well, Uplifting Service, phenomenal book. I'm really looking forward to watching where you go next with your writing. Well, thanks so much for coming on today.
Pleasure to be with you, James, and all your viewers worldwide.
If you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.